Hello, my apparitions, and welcome to the first episode of my brand new podcast, Boo You Horror. Before I begin, I want to give a random shout out to Horrid, Denver's latest and greatest horror shop, along with their partner Screamin' Sugar, for providing a place where I can get the best horror-themed coffee and horror-themed content for my little horror heart. No, they didn't pay me to say that, but I felt like they deserved it. Small businesses supporting small businesses, you know? Now, who am I and why should you listen to my podcast? What is this podcast even about? Well, my name is Gage and I am here broadcasting from Colorado. This is a podcast that I've been planning to do for the past 5 years when my mom first bought me some recording equipment for my birthday, but for many reasons I just never got around to it. After having an epiphany in the middle of the night, I finally came up with the oh so glorious name, which I find hysterically funny, of Boo You Horror. I've been a horror human since I was a kid. My mom more or less raised me on horror movies, and the genre has just always been something important to who I am and how I identify. Out of the 6 tattoos I have, 4 of them are horror related. I will not travel somewhere unless there is an opportunity to go to someplace haunted or that has been featured in one of the amazing horror movies that I've grown up on. I am admittedly a Stephen King junkie, guilty as charged, and have read probably half his books. I've been to Part Hope twice, which if you didn't know is where they filmed the new It movies, and I am literally named after Gage Creed from Pet Semetary, hence if you guessed why this first episode is called Welcome to the Semetary with an S, that would be it. But who am I outside of horror? Well, for one, I'm a cosplayer. You can find me on Semetary Cosplay, where I not only do famous horror icons, but a whole span of other characters. I'm an ex-Disney cast member of 8 years, who on top of making this podcast is also trying to branch out into the travel agency field to plan magical vacations for everyone. But probably the most important, and the thing that relates to the podcast the most, is that I am a therapist. I graduated with my master's in 2017, and I have an LAC, or a License in Addictions Therapy, as well as an LPC, which is a Licensed Professional Counselor. I work full-time as a therapist, specifically for LGBTQ+ individuals to discover and process their sexual and gender identities, and more or less work through an onslaught of trauma that often comes from unsupportive families. So why is that the most important? Well, let's talk about what Boo You Horror... I'm gonna love saying that every single time. You're gonna have to get used to it. Let's talk about what it's about. As mentioned, a few years back, I decided I wanted to make a podcast. There are already so many wonderful podcasts out there about horror movies. Shout out to my friend Let's Get Gory on TikTok. And I wanted to do something a bit more unique and in my own wheelhouse. I run a history of horror panel at conventions that I guest at, but I wanted to combine a few things that I love. So the combination of therapy and horror really came into my mind. This podcast is going to take us through the world of horror movies from the lens of a therapist. I'll be analyzing the main horror movie monsters and their protagonists, understanding their agendas, their psyches, and not just that they're villains for the sake of being villains, because they all have their reasoning, and a lot of it is trauma-based. But wanting to understand, if they were sitting in a therapy room, what would the therapist come out with them for their diagnoses? Ooh, you might agree with me, you might not, and that's okay. I just thought it would be an interesting challenge to take my career and bring one of my passions into it. If you're into horror and won't be bored listening to me talk and gush about horror movie characters for 15 to 30 minutes an episode, definitely subscribe. If there's a movie you'd like to see me analyze, drop me a line. Nothing is off the table. I hope you all enjoy, and like the title of the episode says, welcome to the Semetary, and thanks for joining me on this journey into the mentality of horror characters. Have a good one, everyone.